Hey everybody, Black Ninja 797 here, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a philosophical commentary for you guys about the perception of meaning. Basically, I'm going to be asking you guys the question, what matters? What is something that matters to you? What is something that matters to everyone else? And what is something that matters to me, as an example later on in the video? Basically, this is going to be my very first shot at a official true philosophical commentary. For me personally, one of my favorite YouTubers is Drifter, who is a known gaming YouTuber, preferably for Call of Duty, but he also does have a very philosophical and, you know, kind of like educational style types of videos every now and again, and I want to make a video inspired by that. I've always enjoyed myself a classic good old commentary where someone just sits down and talks and gives their opinion on something. That's always been me. That's been always my types of styles. And yes, even though my videos have changed over the years, I love just simply just having gameplay with a story or an opinion laid over it. So I guess you could say it's classic COD style commentaries. A lot of these existed back like in pre-2010. But that's not necessarily the point of the video. The point of the video is that, yes, I would like to try to start to do a philosophical commentary here today, and also in the foreseeable future. Not necessarily having a set rhyme or reason or schedule, but I definitely want to start implementing them a lot more than I used to. I tried my crack at them, but I was quite young, so I didn't really have a good format for it. I am going to, for the most part, have this not going to be necessarily the most structured, kind of just go with the flow, but it will be a lot more constructed than my other videos, so that way it doesn't necessarily go off of rhyme or reason that is too chaotic or too hard to understand. Basically just have a little bit of flow, but also not necessarily get sidetracked. But yeah, guys, enough with the rambling about rambling. Let's get on with the video. So, basically, what I want to talk about is the perception of meaning, or what makes things matter. This is my humble opinion on the matter. I'm not necessarily a scientist, and I'm also not necessarily a doctor. But however, though, I am a well-informed individual that really does prefer to do the self-education route, and I'm going to be sharing what I personally learned and just what I have ended up experiencing as a person. And I would like to get your guys' opinion on this. Let me know in the comment section down below by the end of this, what do you think of my opinion, and if so, what do you have for advice? But yeah, guys, let's talk about this. So, what gives something meaning? Like, if you were to take something, anything at all, whether it be a food, a person, a place, or a thing, you know, like noun style, person, place, or thing. If you could think of anything or anyone, what gives something meaning? And if so, what meaning, you know, should be applied to things? Because I would like to believe that not everything is necessarily black and white, where everything is 100% good or 100% bad. And yes, it can be vague when you say, well, I'm not sure, or this is 50-50, or this is a little bit of both. And that's a reasonable assumption. You could be like, yes, that's not really necessarily clear, and that definitely is vague. But however, though, like I said, I don't see things as all black and white. I see that as a reasonable example of when something kind of is stretching the, I guess you could say, the limits to what the perception is of good and bad, or in this case, you could say meaning. So, let's talk about something, for example, in my opinion, that I have a lot of meaning with. The YouTube channel. So, for example, my YouTube channel, I've had this YouTube channel since 2010, and I love this thing. I've loved my channel. I have enjoyed making videos for the last several years, like literally a whole decade of my life. Oh, like, I'm 21, so I've been doing this literally over longer than anything else in my whole entire life. I mean, crap. I mean, the only thing I've done a little bit longer than this maybe is video games, because I got my first Wii in 2007, so I guess it's the second longest thing I've ever done, and it's been most of my entire, like, life, most of my childhood and beginning of my adult life. And I love my YouTube channel. But what makes me love my YouTube channel? Well, I've given previous examples in the past, but I will reiterate them for the sake of the commentary. Some examples include the fact that I love social interaction. I enjoy getting to interact with fellow like-minded people, such as my subscribers, my followers, my friends and family who've even checked out my YouTube channel. I also just enjoy, in general, just making friends. So I enjoy meeting new people and getting like-minded individuals to end up, you know, playing games with each other, talking about things that we all enjoy, stuff like that. I enjoy being creative. I enjoy expressing my passions. I'm very big in electronics. I'm very big in video formats. I love to talk. So I could go on and on and on and on about what I do and do not like. Now, obviously, this isn't 100% going to be like, oh yeah, I would basically say that YouTube is the best thing in the world. I actually do have other things that I enjoy, and YouTube is not necessarily completely perfect and does indeed have flaws. So, why do I consider it a good thing? Well, because here's the thing, is that YouTube is overwhelmingly more positive than is negative for at least me and my experience. Now, somebody else on the contrary can actually have the opposite experience. Somebody might hate YouTube, and somebody might end up hating it for X, Y, and Z reasons, and explain the following. And that's completely understandable. So, then you end up getting into something I would say a little bit more sketchy. Let's give an example of something. So, we talked about something that I like, such as the YouTube channel, but that's something that's easy to talk about. Let's talk about something that's a little bit more finicky, but I will try to make this sound as reasonable as possible. So please don't get offended and write a hate comment right away. At least give me a chance. So, basically, let's talk about something such as religion or politics. Religion or politics is usually a no-no subject or something that is taboo, but a lot of you guys say I handle these subjects well, so I'm going to give my shot at it for the sake of YouTube, so hopefully no one ends up getting offended, and hopefully someone will learn something from this. So basically, the way that we look at politics or religion, these are usually things that we are kind of described to at very important stages of our life. Usually, I would like to believe religion is welcomed at an early stage of our lives, usually our early childhood, something that we usually learn from our parents, and I would like to believe that politics is something that we get into as we start to grow up through our teenage years into an early adulthood, especially since, at least in America, we vote for our presidential and electoral stuff by the time that we are 18, so that's basically like when we're considered legal adults in our country. So basically, beginning of adulthood is a step for politics, and beginning of childhood is, I would like to believe, usually the sake for religion. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way, it's just how I naturally see it most of the time. So, depending on when you're exposed to something, usually if you were exposed to something when you have a absolute hysteria on positivity or negativity, usually that's when something sticks. And when something sticks with a lot of us, whether it be emotionally or physically or something like that, whenever we end up giving something a meaning, it's very hard to change the meaning of something that we have, even if it's wrong. So, if we get into, like, let's say, politics or religion, if we say, and I'm just going to give a hypothetical example, let's say that somebody doesn't like Joe Biden. If somebody likes Joe Biden, and somebody says that they don't like Joe Biden, who is considered wrong? In my humble opinion, this is where you have to look at it from the glass half full / half empty statement, where, yes, technically, the person that says either or is both right and wrong, because it's perception of perceived value. If you were to say that Joe Biden is horrible because of blank, or he's good because of blank, you personally, as a person, will see yourself as right, and you're trying to convince the other person otherwise. Usually, it is very rare that someone switches their opinion, especially in mid-argument. You could rule that, yes, it is possible to switch someone's opinion mid-argument, but it's very difficult to do, because it goes off of their perception of meaning, which unfortunately is not all one size fits all. So the most vague way that I can put it, so that way it would apply to everyone, but the most specific way I can put it, so that way it would make a lot of sense to every individual viewer, is this. So, basically, take a look at life, or your perception of meaning, as you. Let's say that you are life. Let's say that you are essentially, I guess you could say God, life, Mother Nature, whatever you want to say, the ruler of the universe, essentially, right? You are essentially the ruler of the universe, and what you say goes. You have disciples and followers, or in this case, you have people that respect you and believe in you, and they basically, like, follow what you say. Not everyone does this, but let's say that you have your followers, right? And now, let's say that because since religion does have multiple gods, let's switch it to a more of a religion subject rather than political, as an example, because that's also another no-no topic usually. Gods are perceived as multiple. You have, different mythologies, you have different religions, and there's all different incantations of what is considered a god in a lot of people's eyes. You've got things such as anywhere from Jesus Christ to the Buddha to the Flying Spaghetti Monster. Now, with these perceived versions, some people look at them as all one and the same, such as that God, the Buddha, and the Flying Spaghetti Monster are all the same person, but just perceived differently. Some people look at them as their own individual gods, and some people look at the other opposing ones as fakes. Now, you could look at this however you see fit. I do not personally judge. But let's say that you were, like I said, going back to the example earlier, like you're God and you rule the universe, right? Now, if we go to religion sense, let's say that somebody is also another opposing God to you, and they do things slightly differently. You don't necessarily happen to agree with everything they do, but you at least respect it and you coexist. Now, there's other people that also follow this other god and don't necessarily follow you. Let's say that this other god, let's say it's you, and let's say it's maybe your identical twin. Let's say that you're God, but your identical twin is the other god, right? And the identical twin, yes, is theoretically your identical twin, but there is slight differences, such as the soul within the body, you will. They're a different entity, or they're a different person. They will have different characteristics, and they're not identical to you, because that's just not how identical twins work. There is slight differences. So, if we were to go up to these people and we would try to point out the differences, why would we criticize some and not criticize others? Like I said, it's usually because we either associate things with a lot of pain or a lot of pleasure. Usually we are exposed to them from early childhood or in early adulthood, and we usually get this meaning inflicted on us by our parents, because naturally as human beings we learn from experiences and from others. People traditionally that don't have a father or a mother figure, or even just somebody to look up to for that matter, usually struggle with meaning, and meaning is raised into us. For example, you are born and your perception of the world is what you learn from others. Take your parents, like I said for the example. They teach you how to walk, they teach you how to talk, they feed you, but hope that you can eventually do it on your own. They clean you to figure out how you would hopefully do it on your own. You eventually learn everything up until you are independent and basically can go on your own, but you never stop learning. And what you do with what you learn from your parents usually translates for how you try to use that in your job, and then try to learn from your job so you can learn from your job so you can learn how to make money, and so you can basically learn how to have a wife and kids and be able to eventually move on your own. That's kind of like the example of a basic lifestyle. And that's kind of the vague way I can put it, is that you're the god and your identical twin is the god, and you have basically slight differences, but the only real thing that makes them perceived as different is your perceived value, which usually is, like I said, learned from others at important stages in our life for either really good or really bad times. So let's give an example of somebody, let's give a fictional story, right? Let's give a fictional story about someone, about how they would perceive meaning on something. So let's take two people, right? Let's take a pair of sons, right? And then they have a drunk dad. Somebody that is a completely intoxicated buffoon. Somebody that has got too much alcohol in their system. They're very horrible to be around when they're drunk. And basically, they're a lowlife. And both sons, they grow up with their dad being a drunk from a very young age. They were both born relatively around the exact same time and had, their mother and their father, who the mother was basically the supportive role while the dad basically went, and basically screwed up and wasn't really a good father figure for these sons. In turn, they would take more after their mother, and depending on how their mother perceived things, that would in turn affect their behavior. So let's say that the way that the mother handled it was to be tough. And theoretically, yes, you're supposed to have a balance between being a tough person and also being a open, kind person. But not to be necessarily sexist, but there is usually a traditional role with the dad being more of the tough one and the mom being the more loving one, even though, yes, you can have both be each one of the other. In turn, because the fact that the mom is trying to make up for the dad being a drunk alcoholic, she has to end up being both. So in turn, what happens is you subconsciously assume that you pair up women, and your mom in particular, with being tough. So therefore, you associate your dad with negativity and almost kind of associate with guys in general. Little minute differences like that. You might end up actually having a different perception depending on, like I said, but I'm trying to be as specific as possible with vagueness, because otherwise this video could go on forever. So let's say that you associate now, because your dad was a drunk, that your mom now was the protector. You would associate women as being a lot tougher. You would in turn, if you were looking for a spouse, seek out more manlier or tomboy style women. And also, in turn, you would end up having either a strong hatred or, in turn, a strange obsession with alcohol. Let's go back to the sons here for a second. If you had the two sons again here, right, they could go on completely opposite paths. One son could, in turn, be an alcoholic just like the dad and end up having a obsession with it and be exactly almost kind of like a clone of him. And then the other son could say, I'm going to take after my mom, and I'm not going to let my dad's influence affect my life, and I'm going to be the opposite of an alcoholic, and I'm going to be completely away from drugs, anti-drug everything, and I'm going to set my foot, in the door, and I'm going to get everything, I'm going to basically get my shit straight, and I'm going to end up having my wife and kids end up having the best lives possible and not let them be succumb to alcoholism. So what makes the difference between the two sons? Why would one son, in turn, particular, become the alcoholic like the dad, and then end up becoming a non-alcoholic like the dad? Well, this is a story that I didn't make up 100% in full. I've heard it somewhere. And basically the answer that both sons give as a reply to this question is they say, I looked at my dad. I was raised by my dad. I learned from my dad. That last one especially, I learned from my dad. Basically, one of them learned from their dad that in turn, alcohol means either X, Y, and Z, which for the dad in this case, you could say the alcohol was because he was either depressed, or he was naturally addicted, or in general that he was just trying to cope for something. Naturally, alcohol is usually a downer to try to end up blocking out things such as pain. So let's just say an example that the boss of his job let him go, and because he got let go from his job, he got depressed, and therefore he drank alcohol to make himself feel better. The one alcoholic son would in turn look at being like pain is solved by pleasure, and pleasure comes from alcohol. That's why he ends up doing that. However, the one son in particular, the opposite son, ends up looking at being like, I'm looking at from my mom's side, where, like, let's say the dad was abusive a little bit when he was drunk, or basically like a horrible person. You could then say that alcohol leads to pain, and pain is because of the alcohol. So, same items, same people, but completely different meaning. So why did one in particular get a completely different meaning than the other one, even though essentially it would be very easy to do one way or the other? What makes one pick the other one, and what makes the other one justified on picking that reason? Here's the thing. Our perception, like I said, of good and bad is based off of who we learn it from at an early age with extreme pain or pleasure. Depending on if you want to get more philosophical about this or not, or if you want to get more spiritual about this, I would like to believe that in turn, other than science, yes, I do believe in religion, so I'd like to believe there is a soul or a spiritual element with this. You as a particular person have a aura, or a, I guess you could say, a perceived vision of yourself, or like perceived vision of you. So I would like to believe in science just as much as religion and vice versa. You don't see that too often. But basically, I would like to believe that as long as we end up having our souls, they kind of play a balance with our brains. So our brains are made of chemical components to release dopamine and serotonin and cortisol and all those different chemicals that basically you've heard off and on again. But basically, our brains are meant to keep us safe, happy, and also to repopulate. That's basically like the main gist of things with our brain. Naturally, as human beings, we're meant to end up being very happy, like basically like pleasuring ourselves all the time. You can take that as you wish, and basically keep ourselves safe so that we're not going to be near any danger, and also basically to spread our seed and basically keep the human line going. That's like the main three things our brains are naturally inclined to do. At least the case for the happy and healthy brain. But the soul of us, this is something that is a little bit more hard to describe. I would like to believe that our soul is more rather with what our personality is, like why we like certain things. Like, for example, why some people end up becoming a sports athlete, or why some people play music and become a musician, or why some people end up becoming a YouTuber and playing video games, such as myself. And this is all I would like to believe in terms of the soul. You can maybe go into things such as past experiences with an alternate life, and being like reincarnated. You could go into this in the sense of being like, yeah, you maybe learned something from heaven for God, or maybe God had a plan for you. There's so many different meanings that you could apply on this. But I would like to believe that nothing is set in stone. So you could look at this from so many different ways, but I feel like that the best way that you can be the ultimate you is to be well informed, other than like a select few other things. Obviously, being a nice person is definitely a number one goal for being successful and just being a very rich person, not necessarily in money, but just rich in life. But another thing is being well informed, whether it be from what you learn from others or even your own self-education from experiences. I would like to believe that when you end up learning something, that everything has value, even in the small things and even in the painful things. Whether you realize it or not, you're subconsciously always learning, and you're associating things for the sake of you trying to end up having your best life, whether you realize it or not. So if you end up having, like, let's say a traumatic experience, as much as you don't like thinking about that particular thing and you try to avoid that thing in turn is because your brain made a decision / yourself. So if you, like, let's say, end up going back to the abusive father story, if you end up having the abusive father story, you in turn would either go towards or against alcohol for X, Y, and Z reasons. And the reason why for that is because I would like to believe that it's not only a mixture of our brains trying to keep us safe and also having the most pleasure based off of what it perceives as, the quickest and easiest way to get to that, especially if it's easier. Easier things sometimes are more important to our brains than the fact that they're actually good. Like, sometimes we'll take the easy route, and even if it's bad for us. But yes, I would like to believe that past lives / influence of others, religion, or what you also believe in general, like spiritually, also does have a play in everything. Because if you end up looking at something like somebody, we almost kind of have like this aura or vibe about ourselves. Have you ever just looked at somebody and you just get this gut feeling, like this, not even necessarily a primal instinct, but just like you have this gut feeling like you're being watched, or like a paranormal experience, like you get this vibe, this energy, this essence off of somebody, and you're just like, this person is either a good person or a bad person, like in an instant, and you can't explain it. That's what I'm talking about. I genuinely believe that there's kind of like a essence or an aura around people, whether we'd like to believe it or not, and this sometimes is predisposed to us, and it's up to us to either work with it or even work to try to change it. I'm not saying that naturally people are going to be by default good or bad. I like to believe that being good and bad is going to be primarily on your actions. But however, though, I believe we are predisposed to a certain path, and we actually have to try to specifically choose on purpose to either stay on that or change it depending on what we see fit. So I honestly would like to believe that the way that we look at meaning at the end of the day is basically, in summary, this. If you, in turn, are born, you are going to be basing your experiences off of what you've learned from usually your parents or your authority figures or just people you are naturally around all the time, because you are the company that you keep. So you would basically look from your early childhood all the way up to even your adulthood, even the rest of your life, and looking at your really positive or really bad experiences and learning from that subconsciously or consciously. And you learn basically that X, Y, and Z will keep me safe, comfortable, and happy. Naturally, I would also like to believe that there's a spiritual aura around things, or a spiritual aura around other people as well. And we actively have to work to change that or to keep the path that we are going. And I feel like that if you were to take an item or a person, if you were to give a stamp or a meaning to something at the end of the day, even though a lot of people don't necessarily like labels, because a lot of people, if it's a bad label, they don't want it. Here's what you got to think about at the end of the day, truly, if you really got to think about at the end of the day, is that the best types of people are the ones that are always open to change. Yes, the best people are always the ones that are open to change. Survival of the fittest, yes, might be a way that you might look at this, but I'm just talking about it as a standpoint of generally having a rich life. Your brain, like I said, or you as a person, naturally want to stay happy, healthy, and you would like to give this to others, whether it be your offspring, your spouse, your family, your friends, or even just the society, whatever you prefer. Eventually, we all like to give back in some form or capacity. Otherwise, we're just completely in it for ourselves, and we might as well just not be born. I feel like that we need to get back to something somehow. But if you take a look at that, if you take a look at that basically bucket list of checkpoints that you need to meet, I feel like that's a good perception on how we label things, because if you subconsciously think about it, you're not going to notice it. But if you genuinely think about it, like if you ever take a moment to look at something, before you give the meaning to something, or even as you are doing it, be like, why am I giving this something meaning? Or why do I not like something, or why do I do like something? Like, what makes you think that? Because some people honestly can't remember for the life of them because it was so long ago that they gave something a meaning. But who's to say that something had to have that meaning, and why does it have to stay? You know what I mean? Like, labels in general, like, life was only the meaning that we give it. It truly is, because you can also have an opinion change, and when an opinion changes, that new opinion overrides the old opinion. You're like, why the heck did I think that thing for so long? Like, your old opinion, it looks stupid. It's because you have to have certain things click it, and sometimes certain things will only click if you say a certain key word, or do a certain action, or have a certain thing happen to you. And I think that truly the meaning that we give something is going to be dependent on our circumstances, but I feel like that being open to change is the best part. if we have a moment where we're in a situation, whether it be for good or for worse, if we are at least open to change, that is the best thing for us. Because here's the thing, is that in case we are ever wrong, in case we ever are not safe, in case we're not happy, in case we even are actually, and we're trying to, like, let's say, because one need cancels out the other, like, let's say in order for us to be happy, we have to end up in turn hurting somebody that we care about or not giving back to something that we intended, or vice versa. Or let's say that we're safe, but we're not happy, or we're happy, but we're not safe. Your brain's going to try to end up doing the process of elimination and prefer what is best, or try to get majority rule usually. And the way that you do that is through change. So if you are open to change, especially if you are wrong and you need to correct something, that is when you end up conquering the world. If you are well informed, you are a naturally kind person, and you try to conquer the world, and you follow your brain's instincts to end up being happy, healthy, and try to give back to society, whether that be, repopulating the earth by, having several children, or trying to give back to your community, or even in a religious sense by, like, what you did, you can give back to your society by actually having a meaning that you do, even through this. Like, I am giving back to my society by giving one of my gifts, which is being able to talk about things and spread information, because self-education, in my opinion, is one of the best things you can do, and I want to give that education to others, especially you guys. Basically, that is my opinion. That is my brief summary on my first attempt at a philosophical commentary about the perception of meaning. I know this is very different from my normal videos where I talk about gaming, but a lot of you guys have given me the compliment of saying that I'm very good at talking about deep topics and having a deep conversation. So who knows, maybe you might watch this video at 3 a.m. in the morning. You might think this is like the hot shit to go to sleep to, because I do that too myself. But yeah, guys, that is basically my first crack at a philosophical style type of video. At the end of the day, that is what it is. I probably have said this several times, but it's the truth. I hope you guys ended up enjoying today's video. If you did, I tremendously appreciate if you guys could drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know if you guys want to see more philosophical videos in the future. I hope you guys ended up enjoying another YouTube video from the most unique YouTuber you guys are ever going to see. Peace out, guys.